Hello and welcome to the show today with myself, Shane Stapleton, with Phil Lanigan of the Daily Mail and with All-Ireland winner Darrow Canada, All-Ireland winning captain, I should add, brought to you by orgaretro.com. First off, men, we've had a very busy weekend. We've seen league titles handed out across both hurling and football. Start off with Kerry, Dara. I mean, what a performance it was against Mayo yesterday. 319 to 13 points. Obviously, 1-6 for David Clifford really took the headlines. But just, I suppose, generally just starting off, what do you think this means for this Kerry team, what it means for the likes of Jack O'Connor?
I don't think there's any point in playing it down. It is significant. I suppose historically the notion in Kerry would be, yeah, it's only the league and let's move on and let's start preparing for the championship. But this year has been different, I suppose, because in the sense that we needed a good league, we needed to set out our stall a good bit. I think Jack O'Connor famously has a habit of winning the National League in his first year in charge, and that part of that box has been ticked. But looking for improvements right throughout the league, they were there. There was a few blips along the way last weekend against Tyrone in the final round where they had already qualified. Was a bit of a blip, but it is significant in the sense that there are tangible improvements now in this Kerry team, and that's the significance of it. I think, even Kerry people forget we won the league last year effectively. We won the league the year before. We were in the league final in 2019. And because of, one slip in the championship against Tyrone, one slip the previous year against Cork, it tends to get forgotten. But it is significant in the sense, as Jack O'Connor said himself after the game, that they've won a big game in Croke Park, and the silverware is welcome. And but the most pleasing aspect from a Kerry point of view is the improvement, particularly in the defence.
Yeah, what do you think, Phil? Was this Kerry being really good, or are we looking at a Mayo team shorn of a half back line of, Owen McLaughlin, Paddy Durcan, Oisin Mullen, and maybe they're not quite as bad as this performance suggested?
Yeah, I was talking to a Kerry colleague this morning who was suggesting just that. Asher Mayo only had half a team out, and look, they clearly were going through, a heavy set of conditioning. They were stuck to the ground, and that. I'm not so sure. I don't see the benefit of Mayo getting hammered the way they did. Like, I was down in Thurles sitting beside you, Shane, on Saturday evening, and the Waterford hurlers are 2 weeks out from their round robin Munster Championship, and the idea of them, there was no sign of them kind of being stuck in the ground or going through heavy stuff, even with a slight difference in time frame. So the idea of like getting to a final, I think Mayo wanted to be solid, and the way they set up, like, there were, again, so much talk about David Clifford and his performance, but Pádraig O'Hara, like, being left one-on-one pretty much for the game and different things like that. Like, there were tactical things which you would think a Mayo management would have been able to address. And then there was the attacking side of things. So many of the same problems, I guess, we saw even in the All-Ireland final. Like, that can't be a good thing from a Mayo point of view.
Would you go along with that, Dara, that is this much a reflection of Mayo being in bother at the moment, or do you think they'll be all right on the night when they're against Galway in 3 weeks?
It's a cause for concern, I'd say. Yeah, of course. Look, they're missing some fantastic players. They're missing more than a third of what would be their ideal starting team. You're talking Oisin Mullen, Paddy Durcan, Owen McLaughlin mentioned there, Diarmuid and Killian O'Connor, Rob Henley, who's a big part of their game as well. Of course, that's a factor. But I don't think they went to Croke Park yesterday kind of expecting to play like that or wanting to play like that. Mayo supporters would have had a good look at Galway and Roscommon beforehand as well. It was actually a better game. It was closer, it was tighter. And, sometimes because the atmosphere doesn't be as good, it can tend to mask the fact that it's played at quite a decent standard as well. Roscommon set up very cleverly yesterday, I thought. And their immediate focus obviously is going to be Galway, but they're not going to be losing any sleep over it. But at the same time, it's concerning that you're losing games like that. Mayo are famously, they don't capitulate, they don't give up, and it's very easy to throw that word out today. But it had that appearance of it that they just didn't. At a particular stage in the game, they realized, okay, let's switch to championship now, and that's not. That's not ideal. I see Jordan Flynn got a late belt from Jack Barry, for example. He got a bit of an injury and got taken off. That's sensible. But there were still players in the field, and it was almost like they had cashed in their chips at that stage. And that's not good. And it's not good. I don't care what way you look at it. You like to win games. Nobody goes out to lose games, no matter what kind of games they are. Famously, last year, Kerry showed a lot of their hand against Tyrone, let's say, and Tyrone went on afterwards and said they learned an awful lot from that. Well, if that's the tactic, we learned nothing about Mayo yesterday. But I would be concerned. I would be concerned if that's the level of their performance. You know, we always hear when a team puts on we've done it ourselves, a shoddy enough performance, a leggy performance. Oh, they're in the middle of a training session. They're in the middle of a period of heavy training. That can't always be used as an excuse. You still like, to make the right decisions on the ball, to take the right shot options, and that wasn't happening yesterday.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Can we move on to the Pádraig O'Hora against David Clifford? What was your thoughts on that? I mean, look, as someone who's been a defender most of my life, I'd be thinking, what's Pádraig O'Hora supposed to do? Just stand there and watch Clifford kick scores? Maybe you look at it slightly different, Dara, having played in the forwards. What are your thoughts on it?
All backs are evil, all forwards are good.
Yeah, of course.
It's pointless, really. Probably works for certain backs against certain forwards. It wasn't a major factor in my time playing football, but it always surprises me how people engage now, and they actually seem to be not even nasty stuff. They appear to be banter. I always tried to have a policy when I was playing of not even talking to my opponent if I could at all. And that was out of respect for him as well as for who I was playing for. I just didn't want to be talking to these people, good or bad, And the player I most respect from my time playing would be Darren Fay, because he had a similar approach. We never spoke to each other for any time we were marking each other. We never opened our mouths to each other. And you'd respect that because he was a great player. It's moved forward to the modern game, 2022. Players seem to be engaging with each other an awful lot more, good or bad, on the field. They seem to know each other a good bit more than we knew our opponents, I suppose, as well. They're probably mixing a bit more. The social media has added an awful lot to it, I'm sure. But it's really pointless when you think about it. It's so pointless for most players yapping on like that. And you could see this one coming with Clifford. Like, Clifford probably would have let that game peter out in a way yesterday because the game was over. But he got the bit between his teeth. Then when O'Hora was talking to him, and it was only going to be one outcome there, especially the way the space that opened up in front of him, especially the way with Tony Brosnan had drifted back the field and was delivering good ball in. So it was pointless, but it was, look, the end product was a joy to watch. Like, just Clifford saying, look, I'll show you and I'll show the rest of the country like that this is pointless. And I don't think it's a tactic that will work against like David Clifford. It didn't work with other, it never worked with Maurice Fitzgerald in my time, that kind of stuff. And it wasn't a factor really. Clifford showed us yesterday, where the game could have just gone into nothing, trash time. He entertained us for another 10 minutes beyond his remit, maybe.
Yeah, Phil, just to ask you a little bit more about this. I look at sometimes forwards end up getting carded wrongly, like Shane McGuigan a few rounds ago for Derry against Roscommon. I suppose Clifford, even a couple of years ago up in Tyrone, he wrongly got sent off in that game. And I wonder in a tighter game, if Mayo didn't leave themselves completely wide open so you could drive a bus through the middle of their defence, and you had a defender who's closer to Clifford, maybe frustrating him a little bit more, might it work in that situation? I totally take what you're saying, Dara. I'm just curious, Phil, your side of it.
Look, I would have thought plenty of defenders goes on all over the country, club, county games. And again, I suppose defenders are just looking for an edge or looking to do anything, particularly when the odds are maybe stacked against you, you're one-on-one or going up against players. So, this has happened so many times before, but it's just interesting. I wonder, was there any motivation for it? Because there was a suggestion maybe that Jordan Flynn obviously took a kind of late hit from Jack Berry. Could have been a black card, probably should have been a black card. And there was a bit of a smirk when he got the yellow. And I heard someone suggesting that it was a reaction from Clifford and linked to that on O'Hora took umbrage after kind of seeing the incident. So we don't kind of fully know whether there was any bit of motivation, but he was just collared bang to rights. And the thing, like Dara said, whatever about doing it off camera, you got to be clever. I was only writing about like Shane Warne in cricket celebrated. He only had his memorial service there, just a week ago. Like Shane Warne, one of the most talented and celebrated cricketers, but like loved sledging as part of the game, was nearly part of his persona. We've seen it with Kieran Donaghy in your own county, loved the bit of verbals. Again, it's kind of part of the basketball court setup anyway. It kind of goes on, so Ricey McLennan was obviously a brilliant ball player, but it kind of was part of his armory. I think the best players, as Dara said, know how to just tune that out. And I think you got to pick your moments because like Clifford, he's just in the form of his life, unbelievable. And when you're on the back foot like that, it's probably not the cleverest.
Dara, what do you think that David does that other players can't do? Is it the power, the way he's able to lean into lads, push him off, and then somehow he has this shooting ability to blast it over from anywhere? Is it his move? Like, what is it, do you think, that's making him so good at the moment?
It's a combination of, I'd say, 100 different things. One of the key things with Clifford, when you see the ball approaching, when the ball gets as far as midfield, is his movement or non-movement. He chooses when to move, when not to move. And then when the ball is kicked, and that's the idea, I suppose, look, that's what's out there now. Like, do not allow the ball to be kicked into him, because he will be one-on-one in that situation if he can slow it down further out the field and get a few lads around him. But before the ball kind of lands in his general area, even before he secures possession, he's taking a scan around the place, just watching the little pieces of chess, where and he seems to be that step ahead. Maurice Fitzgerald had it as well, just that sixth sense of where the next move is, and we're all wise after the event, but he just has that rare ability to do that. When ball in hand, then he's extremely hard to dispossess. Against Tyrone in Killarney last Sunday in a critical part of the game, he made a poor Stolo, and he got dispossessed, and it was like, it was like one of the wonders of the world that this could happen. It does happen, but generally speaking, when ball in hand, his decision making is excellent. And then he, when he's under pressure, he has this lovely crisp fist pass, sometimes low and hard, but it always has the perfect weight on it. His fist passes aren't looping; they're hard and into the chest usually, and they're anticipating who's receiving it as well. So he has so much to his game. For a big man, he's not amazing in the air, but he doesn't need to be. He's two-legged, and he's the ultimate two-legged nearly, in the sense that most people's range is, I kick with my possibly weaker leg now when I'm only 20, 30 yards out. He can kick with, I think his right leg is his weaker leg. He can do damage from about 40 yards with that as well, So you're a defender and you're watching this, you're going to need help. It's going to be modern defending. It's not going to be traditional defending that's going to get this guy. I've seen him have quiet games in the All-Ireland minor final when he was 17 against Galway. He was actually quiet enough that day, and then he gets the goal of the season in the last 10 minutes. Sean O'Malley Kieran from Galway did a reasonable enough job on him that day. He was quiet in the Sigerson final this year, but that was an awful night above in Carlow. It was windy, it was wild. I was at that game, and I actually went behind the goal to watch him both, just to see his movement. And no matter how much he moved, it was pointless, because the ball wasn't going to come quickly enough, because the wind was so strong in one half, and the second half the game was up. Galway were UCG were in control. But the big thing is just his sense of anticipating where, he's not playing for himself. I think his first instinct is actually to see where the danger is, who's most dangerous. Am I the most dangerous forward here when I receive the ball, or am I not? And his decision making in that split second is exceptional.
But it's kind of rare, is it, to see such a skillful forward be so kind of physically dominant at the same time? Like you see generally, across sport, whether it's your Messi or even with, say, the Gooch or DJ Carey in hurling, you're really skillful kind of top forwards, generally kind of bamboozle the opposition. But like, he's got that capacity, I don't know, like in basketball, like LeBron James, to just bully the opposition almost, which is kind of another dimension maybe that a lot of even the best players across sport don't even have.
Yeah, he can play it. He can play it whatever way you want. He can play it non-contact, or he can play it contact. But people forget Maurice Fitzgerald was like that as well. Maurice didn't mind it heavy and hot. Like, he didn't mind, if you were sewing it into him. And in fact, you get the gritting of the teeth, just like you got in the last 10 minutes with Clifford yesterday, saying, okay, if you want it this way, this is the way it's going to be played. And he has that. They're big frame. Maurice was 6 foot plus. David is 6 foot plus. Big trunks, underneath him, strong all round, well developed, physically, and in close quarters he will lose the odd ball with good defending and with persistent defending. But he just seems to have that ability to choose, and he's a few fake hops as well, which buy him a bit of time. He just has a lot of it. I don't know if he plays basketball. I wouldn't know, David, but I'd say he seems to be like no more than the Gooch, and these lads would have played a bit of basketball in the SEM as well. And with St. Brendan's Killarney would have that history of producing basketballers and footballers. But it's just, I don't know even what weight the man is like, but he's very hard to knock off the ball, like, and he relishes the physical side of it as well, which is, as you say, strange in a forward.
Would you reckon that Kerry are finding the right balance in the team now? I remember earlier in the league, Dara, against Kildare, there was talk that maybe the half-forward line was a bit too small. There was Dara Moynihan and Paddy Clifford, and I can't remember, maybe it was Micheál Burns or someone with a similar size profile that day. You have the likes of Adrian Spillane, who played yesterday. And then also, I believe Stefan Okunbor is going to be back in the next, later this week. So there's another big unit to throw into the team.
Yeah, one of the key things that happened in that Kildare game is Gavin White went off injured with a pulled hamstring. And that was your panic merchant gone. That the guy that creates panic in the opposition defence with the runs. So then you became kind of one-dimensional. So it was unfair then to kind of say, listen, Micheál Burns, Dara Moynihan, and all these lads are out there and they're not doing it. They no more than Mayo missing Oisin Mullen yesterday, Paddy Durcan, how that would have changed. It's a different type of game when you have those danger runners coming from deep. It's a different type of Mayo team that they're producing. Gavin White went off against Kildare that day, and Kerry just became ordinary for long periods of that game. In terms of balance, they have options. They have the options. Adrian Spillane was outstanding yesterday, right in front of the Hogan stand at one stage in the second half. He took a kick out and took two belts. One turned out of one belt and hit another belt, and still managed to retain possession and pass it off nice and calmly. Unsung kind of stuff. And critically, from his own point of view, got 2 points, which means now that you're going to have to mark him as well because this fella can score. He wouldn't be a noted scorer in Kerry. And then you have a different type of build in Dara Moynihan, who harasses, like you see a couple of times yesterday, Dara Moynihan, sowing it into Aidan O'Shea when he's in possession, trying to dispossess him, trying to addle him, trying to annoy him, fairly most of the time. So the balance of the mix is there. Jack O'Connor loves hard-working half-forwards. So you get something different then again with Stephen O'Brien, a guy who will put the head down and go, and then might run into a cul-de-sac and recycle it and move it back. So they have options. They have a nice balance there. The concern after the first game, the drawing with Kildare was, the stuff had started, like the barking had started in Kerry after the first round of the league. We're back to the old habits again. We're gone too defensive. We're this, we're that. I wouldn't take too much notice. That was the first outing in the National League where your main attacking defender Gavin White had got off injured. I think they're getting an awful lot right now, and their game is suited to Croke Park, and we said the same things last year. That's the one nagging concern from a Kerry point of view. We said really good league campaign, won the league the previous year. We won the league as well, and Cork suckered us. So even speaking to Kerry supporters coming out to Croke Park yesterday, that was the one consistent theme. We've been here before, and
And what about Dara though? The importance of Paddy though as well. Like, I know there's such focus on David, but even at the end of last year, chatted to one of the lads again, and we were kind of saying, well, actually, who is kind of more important in a way, or are they as important to Kerry? Like the role. We interviewed Paddy recently, and it nearly felt a bit unfair that some of the questions were asked about his brother, but like his influence and his importance to that Kerry team now, and again, the weekend being another example, he's vital, Cod, isn't
he? He is, and when you see Conor Myler did reasonably well on him in the last year's semi-final, but Paddy actually wore himself into that game very well in extra time as well. He didn't allow the head drop. You saw him yesterday, missed a goal chance in 5 minutes, missed a goal chance in 32 minutes, didn't allow the head drop. And again, I would love to see a situation as a Kerry person where he gets those goal chances, let's say in the Munster Championship coming up, and he sticks them, and you're saying, okay, this fella's learning from his experiences in front of goal, and that's a sign of a good forward. What I like about Paddy is a ball can come in low to his feet, and Peter Canavan had it, where you could just collect and flip over and actually be turning and facing the goal again in the one movement. He has that. They talk about his range of passing. He has a good range of passing. David isn't over reliant on Paddy for the bullets. Paddy has obviously a connection there, and he knows what runs David likes, but he's not necessarily always looking for David's runs inside. But he's not shy, and he's not afraid of hard work, and he's not afraid to get stuck in. And again, like even the Conor Myler experience last year, that's as good as or as tough as it got for him last year. that'll stand to him. Missing the 2 goals yesterday should stand to him, provided, because those chances will come again for the likes of Paulie, because the inside line are going to be marked so well, and you'd love to see him sticking one of them now soon enough in the championship.
Yeah, James S says, a fellow West Kerry man, does Dara think Moran will come back into the starting midfield? I thought it was a pity Tony Brosnan only came on the 40, would have expected him to start on forward and inside, not half forward. So what are your thoughts then on David Moran, especially with a Kunbor being back in the mix?
Well, up until I think yesterday is not a great game to judge anything on in terms of midfield. Games where Kerry struggled in midfield, against Mayo, inside in Tralee, they struggled for a while. Against Tyrone the last day, they struggled for a while. And especially in the last 10 minutes, when people really focused in on Kerry's kickouts. Now, Kerry, I suppose Shane Ryan is probably in pole position for the goalkeeping position after yesterday. He gave him an absolute peach of a kick out at one stage halfway through the second half yesterday. A low trajectory right down the middle. Could have been intercepted, but wasn't, and that will give him small things like that will give him huge confidence. But in those games against Mayo and that game against Tyrone, when Kerry weren't doing well at midfield, David Moran was coming into the debate again. We still can move on without David Moran. David Moran is one of the best midfielders in the county, in the country. With Tyrone last year as well, when they tried to go long, that long kick out that hurt Kerry in Killarney last Sunday week now. David Moran is very good at organising people under that. I think it would be a stretch to imagine that he can start a championship game and play for 75, 76, 77 minutes. But he still has a very, very strong role to play, I would say. And in terms of his communication, we see it with Tyke Morley at the back. I would say Moran is one of the main communicators and one of the main organisers on the field. So he's a vital part of that Kerry squad, I would say. And
do you see Tyke Morley?
It's Tyke Morley is going to. The only game that Tyke Morley was interpreted, I suppose, was against Tyrone. They're so clever. They made Tyke Morley's role redundant last Sunday week in Killarney. They were too clever. They saw him a mile off, and that didn't exactly work. But again, they'll learn from that. But the midfield, all throughout the league, the conversations in Kerry were about the midfield and who was going to be goalie. And there's hopefully some of those questions resolved now.
Yeah, Phil, just want to ask you about the Cork versus Kerry venue. Just so Cork GA have written to the Munster Council asking them to revisit the decision to move it over to Killarney. Obviously, Páirc Uí Chaoimh is out of commission because of the Ed Sheeran concerts, but the footballers are obviously saying that they're unwilling to play it in Killarney. Mark Sheehan confirmed to 96 FM that they've written to the Provincial Council. What are your thoughts on this now? Because I saw Shane Brophy of the Nenagh Guardian even tweeting that fine, Páirc Uí Chaoimh is smaller, but it's only 11k. But it's the same for Walsh Park, and Waterford are going to be hosting Tipperary in the Munster Championship. So why is it not good enough for Cork? Or do you say for Cork, just blame your administrators, they put on the Ed Sheeran concert?
Well, I'd certainly part blame the administrators, but the integrity of a competition, Shane, if a team gets home advantage, that's it. They get home advantage. And we've gone through all this before. The Newbridge are nowhere. Kildare were absolutely right to stand up for what they were given, what was meant to be a home advantage. We saw it with Antrim. So, I must say, the idea, I was at, in terms of the crowd, I was actually at the relegation match between Cork and Offaly. And I think it was 1:38, 20 minutes before throw-in, Cork footballers jogged out onto the field. And I'd say there was a couple of hundred supporters in the ground. So this idea of 20,000 plus being there, if they're going to be in Killarney, Darrell will probably tell you that mainly Kerry support there for the day out, for the win, for everything else. If you're a Cork footballer, irrespective of how Cork County Board have saddled themselves with a monstrous debt and all the things that are feeding into this, and the need for, the footballers claiming, it's not about finance when their whole county has to be driven by finance now to service the debt. But it does come down to the integrity of home advantage in a stadium that 10,000 could be more than enough for that fixture. Not in terms, there'll be a spillover, but that has to come ahead of the extra few thousand.
Yeah, I think, Phil, to be honest, I think it's a non-story. I really think just get the game played in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. That's what the players want. In fairness, they're being disrespected enough, the Cork footballers, by their own crowd a lot of the time. And if that's where they want to play, let them play it. They should. This is one instance where the player's voice should be listened to, and Keith Ricken's voice and these lads. I don't think it makes one iota of a difference to Kerry. I saw suggestions, that we'd like to play in Killarney. Of course, they like playing. Everybody likes home advantage, but it's Cork's home advantage. It's their turn, and 11,000 people. You might get upwards of 20,000 people to watch Kerry and Killarney. I don't know, Kerry and Cork and Killarney, but I do think like that you could have a great atmosphere inside in Parky Ring with a packed house. You'll definitely get 11,000 with Kerry and Cork supporters there, and it like you mentioned Walsh Park. The debate is going on about Corrigan Park and all these parks. I remember years ago. Up in Dundalk, a match was supposed to be played in Dundalk. These small venues work for the spectator and for the players as well. I have no issue with that.
Sorry, I was at at the Kerry Kildare match again. We had the same crack for the start of the National League. It was a sellout. Now, it might be the place might be nearly falling down and in badly need of cosmetic surgery. But there was a brilliant atmosphere. There was a buzz about the place. You couldn't get near the ground for a park like for about an hour and a half before the game. Every spot was taken. Everyone was in. People were standing like old. So this idea that you need to be seated in plush surrounds or you need a corporate box. So it'll be old school agricultural, great atmosphere.
Brilliant. Let's have it.
Play the game.
Yeah, and I'm sure if the Munster Council will probably sit down soon enough and say, listen, let's go back to Parky Ring, because from a Kerry supporters' point of view, and the people in Kerry aren't really talking about this as an issue. It's maybe Cork people might feel, Cork players in particular should feel a bit slighted. That they're not being listened to, and obviously Munster Council are the ultimate organisers of fixtures, so you play where you're told to play in effect. But this is one case where there should be a bit of flexibility and say, listen, let's sort out whatever issues they are with health and safety or whatever it is with Parky Ring. Let's play the game in Parky Ring if that's what they want.
Do you feel, Dara, that the disinterest, the level of disinterest in Cork football, even within their own county, is that kind of reaching a new low, or at different parts of your career, did you ever sense that there was a disinterest in Cork like this?
No, it's surprising because the first 3 or 4 years of my career, Cork were the dominant force in Munster football. It took us a couple of years to get the upper hand back from them. And with a few exceptions, we haven't really looked back. I mean, they beat us again in '99. They beat us 2 years ago in championship football. They beat us a couple of times here and there, and there's always be cracking games between and onwards to Croke Park when the back doors came in that time. Cork and Kerry were always. It's probably unfair to say it's at a low ebb because there's club football in Cork, especially at underage level, is well organised. I don't have the answers. I'm not going to patronise them by giving them the answers, because nothing annoyed me more when Cork were having the upper hand on us than having Cork people telling us how to mind our house, or how to get our house in order. That's up to themselves entirely. They're not going to get any sympathy on this side of the county bounds, but it is patronising every year for them to be listening to, we need a strong Cork, we need a strong Munster Championship, we need this. It is what it is. It must be disheartening to be a Cork footballer at the moment. I mean, the false dawn of 2 years ago, beating Kerry down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. And I remember coming out of that game thinking, look, Tipperary could actually do a number on Cork here, and that's what happened. It wasn't that Cork's attitude was really good that day. They were really up for everything, and Kerry made basic errors, and they caught us. They caught us with a sucker punch at the end, and fair play to them. But far be it for a Kerry man to be giving advice to Cork people how to run their own show. That's their own business entirely. But if you're to remove the green and gold spectacles, you would like, of course, a strong Munster Championship. When we were going, you had a very strong Clare team, a very strong Limerick team at different stages, a very strong Tipperary team that made Munster finals and pushed us for a couple of years there in the 90s and the early 90s. But it's not good, and it's damaging Munster football. It's damaging, the integrity of the Munster Championship by talking, by even talking like this. I'd love to see.
Cork will come though, Dara, won't they?
You have to imagine they will. You have to imagine they will.
I looked at the figures last week, even doing a piece around Monaghan and their achievement. But at the back of the annual Congress report gives a list of registered teams per county: adult senior football, hurling, under 20 senior football, hurling, and underage. Cork are streets ahead. They've more adult registered teams than Dublin. They've underage. The numbers are phenomenal. So it's nearly amazing how it hasn't translated to consistency.
I suppose hurling is a big thing. Hurling will always be number one in Cork, I would imagine. But I'd be familiar with the Gaeltacht clubs in Cork: Nevabawn, Kilnamartyr, Bealach Gaerig, extremely well run clubs. Good numbers, good fundraising committees, good volunteers behind, and they would be, you'd be envious of them actually, what they're at, like how well organized they are. And, it's a source of, curiosity is how the county team, that's not translating onto the county team. There's no doubt about that. Like, it's a massive concern here in Kerry, South Kerry, which is, I suppose, the traditional stronghold of the artist footballers, the Maurice Fitzgeralds, the Brian Sheehans, the Jack O'Shea's, even Clifford's people are South Kerry, you'd be saying their numbers, underage and the amalgamations that are happening there, that's happening coming down the line in Kerry. There are stark figures there that the areas of growth population in Kerry are central and urban based. And, they're the issues we have to, the shop window is very healthy, as you see yesterday. But, there's way more areas of concern for Kerry football than I would suggest for some of the Cork football clubs.
If you were to just talk about the Kerry team this year, is there any area that you'd be worried about there that might catch you further down the line? Like my thought on all the teams is all of the major players that'll be looking to contend for the All-Ireland, none of them are perfect. Dublin have come back a bit. Tyrone are short 7 players. Mayo maybe in attack, they lack that kind of killer instinct. The question before has been, do Kerry have the steel?
Sure, look, when Dublin were winning 6 in a row, we were saying they had a problem with high balls into the square. You're always looking for something. You're always kind of you're trying to make yourself look smart, to say, I've identified a potential weakness in this team. Kerry, of course, every team has their weaknesses. And then when they lose a game, we say, how did we not see that one coming? The mentality I would have as a Kerry person now is, we should just go ahead and win the bloody thing, because they're too good to be faffing around losing games at this stage. It can happen. They got caught last year against Tyrone. They got caught in other games, and that's the concern. That's the only concern, that they can have an off day. But there was such a level of consistency in the defending, in particular in the league. That's hugely, hugely encouraging. That is not a flash in the pan, I would like to think. So, I mean, I hope, that they just go on and have a good Munster Championship campaign and then move on through the gears. They're playing like they seem to be enjoying it. There's less, yesterday anyway, and that's probably not a good yardstick, but there's less lateral passing. The passes seem to be going forward as well. And that's where the enjoyment comes in. When you see Tony Brosnan, you mentioned Tony Brosnan, and somebody texted in, they're wondering why he came on in the 40. Like, Diarmuid O'Connor was gone off on a black card, so he drifts out the field. And to me, that was a bit of a revelation. Look, this guy can actually be comfortable out in this position, because I would always have seen him as a sharp finisher inside. The closer you have Tony Brosnan to the goal, the better. But maybe there's something there, another option, for Drogheda, because there was a bit of playmaking going on there yesterday when Diarmuid O'Connor went off, and Tony Brosnan was the handler that was handling the ball and delivering it in. They're rightly favourites for the All-Ireland Championship now. We can't hide from that in Kerry, and they're just going to have to wear that mantle now and move on every game, be as cold and as clinical and as ruthless as they were yesterday, and just hope that from a Kerry point of view, that ends up with ultimate success. But of course, the big bears are looming in the shadow all the time. Dublin haven't gone anywhere. Tyrone beat us last weekend, and we wanted to beat them. That's there, and I can't believe that Mayo are as bad as they showed yesterday. They're going to be much better than that. Roscommon, even Galway, all these lads are nicely poised because nobody's talking about them, and that's something that Kerry are going to have to get used to for the rest of the season.
Yeah. Phil, I wanted to ask you, do you reckon, looking at this Mayo attack, that they've found enough to replace Tommy Conroy? I have to say, I came away from the game certainly thinking not. James Carr started poorly, but I thought really came into it later in the first half, got a couple of great scores. But without him, and with, it's so soon for Cillian O'Connor to come back and expect him to deliver, I just don't know where they'll have that killer instinct up front.
Yeah, who's Ryan O'Donoghue looks super player, absolutely natural finisher, a leader. But you think you'd nearly need, for Mayo to win the All-Ireland, you think you needed the three, himself, Cillian O'Connor and Tommy Conroy, all firing as your kind of scoring forwards to have a chance of winning the All-Ireland. Now, maybe, again, they're so dynamic running the ball, and guys like Patrick Durkin, they've kind of built the last decade almost on getting scores from the middle third from out the field. But looking again at yesterday, there was just too many players getting caught in possession, just balls trying to tread passes into the inside line. Aidan O'Shea doesn't even shoot anymore. Never mind score. Like, that idea, they had no focal point, I thought, around the square. Like, Kerry were happy, just they didn't even have to position somebody behind the D there. That whole space was left kind of no threat by Mayo yesterday. But just on, but one thing they're brilliant at is tackling. And as Dara said, kind of Kerry looked too good not to win almost. But I did a couple of pieces last year, and I thought the one thing that actually stopped them winning the All Ireland and that match against Tyrone, like it was an exhibition of tackling by Tyrone, and it's kind of let Kerry down too many times. And I don't think you can clearly see the defensive system being put in place, and maybe the influence of Paddy Talley and what Tyg Morley is doing. But I don't think it'll even boil down to the system of play. It's their actual tackling technique and will they be good enough. Then when Dublin were winning all the All Irelands, it did reach a stage where Paul Mannion was one of the best tacklers on the Dublin team. And like last year in the match against Tyrone, you had too many instances of just soft frees, bad technique. Like even David Clifford gave away free, Killian Spillane. At one stage, I think Tommy Walsh and Killian Spillane, they nearly took each other out. Paul Gainey, at times too many loose fouls. So that idea, like the Donny Buckley thing, I must say I would have thought where Kerry if they're going to win the All Ireland, if their tackling technique improves, and we saw it how Paul Mannion was a 3-in-a-row All-Star, but he reached the stage where he was one of the best defenders. And and I think it will take the likes of, David Clifford and Paul Gainey and the foul count further out the field. If they can get that right, which the lads are smart enough to absolutely get it right, then they'll win. But at previously, what's let them down, and we chatted to Seamus Moynihan previously, that even one-on-one defensively, they just, at times, they weren't good enough. So to me, that'll be decisive. If they can get that tackling technique right from their corner forward all the way back, then they're certainly good enough to win the All-Ireland with the ball.
Dara, is there anyone outside the obvious four that I've probably named already that you see in with a chance? I mean, Armagh have been a team that have excited a lot of people this year, as one example.
They played some very decent football, and they're obviously going the right direction. And even you're looking at Roscommon, yes, they celebrating a national Division 2 title, and the big challenge for them is going to be to hold their own next year in Division 1, because they've been up and down. It's just so important to stay in that Division 1, in that grouping, in that environment, because there's so much to be learned from National League games now compared to when we were playing this before and after Christmas, and it was a matter really of just kind of getting the games over and done with and trying to stay in Division 1. Now it's just so important to have Tyrone, what Tyrone did last year, the learning that they did last year from their loss in Killarney is huge. Outside of that, no, it would take a fierce bolter. I think Kildare are extremely unlucky to be down in Division 2 next year, and I think it'll be very easy if you're in Glen Ryan's shoes to be talking to them over the next couple of weeks saying, look, we're not that far off. We're not that bad. We were very unlucky. And, there's a huge potential for them to come under the radar in Leinster Championship. There is a huge target for them in Leinster, for example. To beat Dublin at some stage. It happened in Leinster anyway. But no, to answer your question, Tyrone are All Ireland champions. They deserve that much respect. They have. We're not putting them that strongly in the picture because historically they haven't got 2 in a row. But they beat Kerry last weekend in the game that Kerry wanted to win. And Armagh are not far off. Of course they're not. But I don't see them. I can't imagine them lifting Sam Maguire at the end of the year. Put it that way, Joe. I can't envision that. Dublin are still there, and Kerry are definitely still there. Mayo. If Mayo get their act together, I mean, Galway people will be licking their lips, I'm sure, at this talk. But Mayo are still a better team than Galway, and Roscommon beat Galway yesterday. I'm sure they'll feel they have to be part of some conversation. They're going to be in Division 1 football. But the reality is, every year for the last couple of years is always kind of, well, for most years it was Dublin, and then who's going to challenge them. But now that Dublin have slipped back, as you say, Kerry are going to have to assume that favouritism for the rest of the year, and then until they stop performing the way they have been performing the league, they'll have to accept the favouritism.
Yeah, it's interesting watching Galway yesterday, and until Shane Walsh came on, the only forward that really impressed me was, surprise, Damien Comer. He was excellent, and then Paul Conroy at midfield scoring 6 from play out of 7 shots, which was some goal, and the fact that he just backs himself every time to take those shots on. But the goal that Diarmuid Murtagh scored, the decisive one towards the end of the game, he only came on for the last 5 or 6 minutes plus injury time. Diarmuid Murtagh was able to go the whole way almost across the D. Then he did a beautiful spin to get past Shane Walsh. Then did a bit of a dummy, which I think was underrated, which allowed him to slip past 3 guys and blast in the top corner. Do you look at that as a bit of genius, Dara, or do you think Galway? What are you doing?
You have to admire that kind of stuff, and you can't say, look, the natural inclination is when you're analysing, say, how did that happen, and it shouldn't be happening. I love that it happened. I love those mistakes being made by defenders, like, and that there's a bit of a genius there, like sticking the ball in the net. But the concern, I think, that came from the fact that all throughout the game, right from the start of the game, Galway were fouling, and not only fouling, but being seen to be fouling. And it was so easy up in the stand to actually call it what the referee was calling on the pitch. There was an innocent, and even some of them were actually protesting the freeze that they were giving. They were saying to the ref that was no foul, and it was as obvious from 80 yards away that it was a foul. So if you're in the ref's shoes, you have to blow the whistle in that regard. And I think maybe the Murta goal came from that they were going to say, look, we're not fouling here, we're not going to foul here, we're not going to foul, and they still haven't schooled themselves in that. And that's natural. You're looking at Jack Glynn, who's a young lad inside in the full back line, Kieran Malloy, whose preferred position is probably out the field, and Liam Silkus having a decent enough year, all right. Like, but I think Galway are struggling to find a full back line that's going to command stuff like Sean O'Malley here on their I suppose standout full back, Sean Andy O'Callagh. These lads aren't in the scene anymore because of injuries and other reasons. They don't have enough defensively. Even when they played Cork in the National League this year, they scored heavily but conceded quite heavily as well. Like, and it was an issue again yesterday. I think Roscommon's first 6 scores came from frees yesterday. It was all free. Every one of them was a free, and that had to hurt. That's the one thing that Galway will have to take away from yesterday's game. Just don't give the referee that excuse to blow the whistle, because it was so. At one stage, I think Kieran Malloy actually pulled the jersey. You could see it stretching a mile away, and he was protesting that it wasn't a free. That kind of stuff has to stop, and that's the one lesson. If I was a Galway person, I'd be taken away from their game yesterday. And again, it's unfair to have the conversation. Roscommon were the better team yesterday. I know they only won by a point, but they were the better organised team. Their set pieces were better. Their kick out. Defensive, the press they were putting on the Galway kickout was way better organised than Galway's, and Paul Conroy was keeping Galway in the game when the game was kind of going away from them.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, Phil. I'm just to look at what Dara is saying there. It was the 26th minute until Roscommon scored from play, and then they got 2 in a minute. McKeown and Murta. Actually, Murta and Donny Smith, some of the scores they got on a day when Enda Smith was good, but wasn't right, quite flying in terms of the scoring stakes. Would you look at the amount of goal chances that Galway offered up and think, well, like, ultimately it's going to catch you out at some stage? Donny Smith had a chance, Enda Smith had a chance, obviously Donny Murta scored, and in the first half, I think it was Ultan Harney got in. That was a tame shot, but just the amount of times that Galway offered up these opportunities.
Yeah, well, kind of linked to what I was saying earlier about, and Dara was saying, about tackling and knowing when to foul, and it's not that you condone cynical play, but like, the clever players know the right time maybe to commit the foul. As Dara pointed out, like, when you're giving away soft fouls that are blatant in front of the ref and kind of maybe arguing the toss, and then if there was a time you said to put in that tackle and make that foul, it was for obviously the match-winning goal. So I think the best defenders know instinctively what to do in the right time, and you'd be a little bit worried that's Galway aren't picking their battles and kind of knowing the right time to kind of to put the boot in or stop a player, and be just a bit more clever about how they're going about their business.
Dara, what do you make of Mickey Hart getting promotions 2 years in a row with Louth? They beat Limerick 115 to 12 points there on Saturday at Croke Park, but just that he's done this 2 years in a row with them and actually claimed the title in there as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen enough. All I've seen is highlights of their games, but looking at it from a distance, they're definitely, stating the obvious, going in the right direction. But it's a new voice, and I'd say from what I'm hearing that Gavin Devlin is getting fierce kudos as well. He's probably one of the better coaches in the game at the moment. And Louth again is a count. You often wonder, the managers, Mickey doesn't have to prove anything to anybody as a manager, but you often these managers pick fertile ground as well, saying, listen, that's something that could be improved immediately, almost overnight. Louth, where there would be a bit of a passion both for soccer and for Gaelic games, but you're kind of saying Louth, 20. I remember they beat us in National League games, and you're saying that at least there's something there, a kind of a memory there of the good times, and they want to be returning to that. Obviously, Sam Mulroy shooting the lights out all year, and they obviously have some marquee forwards. Getting up to Division 2 is a huge achievement, because I actually fancied Limerick to win that one, especially Limerick having lost earlier to Louth. I thought they'd be kind of learning a bit more, but both teams are up in Division 2 next year, which is, from our point of view, good for Munster football that Limerick are up there. It's a huge achievement. You wonder what drives the likes of Mickey Hart, because he's nothing left to prove, really. I know the mileage isn't that huge, like between Tyrone and Louth. That it's not going to wear him down. The journey's back and over, but I'd say, they're a team worth watching. They're a team worth watching in terms of how they'll develop within the Leinster Championship this year. And, they will be organised, and, they will be passionate. And it was even, I saw the reaction on the screen the last day, that, all the Louth players, it meant a lot to them, but Mickey Hart was like zen all the way as usual, and just kind of keeping a lid on it. And, no better vocal to do that, I think, but it's a big achievement for them. I'd say Limerick will be disappointed as well. I would say they really wanted to win that Division 3 title, and there is that consolation of playing Division 2 football next year. But we know all about Mickey Hart down here anyway, so we won't be. It's just a great achievement for them, and it's good for the game that Louth is a county that could have drifted into disinterest. If they were lounging in Division 4 for another couple of seasons. Now they're 4-3 up to 2. I saw Tipperary do something likewise years ago, and just invigorates the whole county, lifts the whole population, and the ground is fertile there in Louth. There is a passion for the game there. So, and you'd often wonder, do these managers choose that? Because you need something to lift the tide.
Darry, you mentioned Gavin Devlin there. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to Sam Mulroy's podcast with Thomas Nibbuck last week. Really interesting. Here's a guy who's kind of, I don't know if you ever did it in your day, kind of basically saying, look, I'm the greatest footballer in the county at times, or here's how I got to be the best forward. And he was he's backed it up all the way. It was a really interesting insight into the dedication, the choices he made. But he mentioned Gavin Devlin, the impact of him, how he came up, I think, with the goalkeeper. He turned to him and said, I have the answer to our goalkeeping problem, because they needed someone. And he said, it's James Callum. He said, I think I watched 8 matches from the local club championship or whatever, and I've watched the video of 8 games, and I know who our keeper is. So the work, his coaching element, and the time that himself and Hart are putting into the job just seems to really capture the imagination of the players and the lads, and explains even some of the tactical shifts, like making the stretch with a keeper like that, taking a midfielder and putting them in. So it was
where they get the time to do this, I'll never know. I'm sure Gavin Devlin is a young man, busy man.
Yeah.
I would have marked Gavin Devlin as a player, and we're a similar age. I would say, how does he get the time to sit down and watch all that stuff? And but people get a kick out of coaching. It wouldn't be for me, to be honest with you. I couldn't, but people, some of my former colleagues and former opponents, you look at them and say, geez, I would never thought you'd have made a good coach. But they're obviously making good coaches. I mean, Fitzmaurice famously, I would have, from our time, you knew he was going to be a good coach, But Gavin Devlin, everywhere he goes, he's respected, and he seems to be making an impact.
A final question for you, Darry. You've been very good with your time. Just before I let you go, Cavan beating Tipperary 210 to 15 points. Not sure if you had an opportunity to watch this, but it's kind of funny that 2 teams who were provincial finalists just, 16, 17 months ago, provincial winners, are now in a Division 4 final. But that's a big win for Cavan anyway, just to get them rolling nicely into the summer again.
It is, of course. And I didn't get the chance to watch it because Radio on the Gaeltacht were celebrating 50 years in existence on Saturday, and we had a concert. So I was checking on Twitter who was winning and stuff like that. But I didn't get a chance to watch it. But like you say, there are 2 teams that shouldn't be in Division 4. And again, you talk about an institutional memory. Cavan and Tipperary memory, if they just go back 2 years. These are lads, and I was listening to some of the commentary actually in the opening, saying, Thomas Galligan, didn't he get an All-Star a couple of years ago? These are lads, Raymond Galligan in goal. How do footballers like that drop down to Division 4? It happened very quickly, but they need to be getting not just to Division 3, to Division 2. That's their standard. Cavan not so long ago were yo-yoing 1 and 2. They were like the Roscommon. They need to be getting back up there. So again, and this year of all years, I think league is significant. I think the connection is between league and championship in future years is going to be very significant. And because the gap is so short this year, it is significant. There's no point dissing it in previous, like we would in previous times. It's only the league. Let's get ready for championship now. The correlation is going to be there for the next couple of years.
Absolutely brilliant to have you on, Darragh. Really appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll be chatting again soon.
No bother. Good to talk.
Okay, great to have Darragh on there. Phil, I'll make a final point then about Tipperary from that football match the other day. I was surprised that I don't know if you got to see the game now, I was watching it myself, and Mark Russell had scored some great scores from Tipperary from midfield and ends up getting taken off with, must have been the guts of 20 minutes to go when you include the injury time, and I was thinking maybe put him in full forward, something like that. He's a scoring threat, but it was probably the poor turnovers that cost Tipperary, and Paddy Lynch with that goal. I'm not sure if you saw his goals, but composed finishes for both of them were exceptional.
Yeah, I think I saw the line from David Power, was it, that even the substitution was nearly the player himself kind of was saying, oh, look, I'm, maybe contributed to it. But look, it's hard. It's like sometimes you see with rugby all the time that lads get to the hour mark, and whether it's a GPS stat or whatever else, that the decision is made, you're coming off, you could, whether you're having the game of your life or not. So, but look, as Darragh said, the two counties who, fighting for winning provincial titles there a couple of seasons back deserve to be up the ranks.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to talk hurling now, and we've got Willie Maher here, my old club manager with Coola. How are things, Willie?
Good. How are you?
Well, not too bad. Might get you to tilt down the screen just a tiny bit there.
There we go.
Lovely stuff. So, look, obviously we've some great hurling to talk about, and you've skin in lots of different parts of the game, which we'll come to at different stages. But we'll have to start off with Waterford and that brilliant win they had over Cork at just there on Saturday evening, 420 to 123. Your own clubmate in Ballingarry there, Liam Cahill, doing a fairly fabulous job at Waterford in his third season here. What are your first thoughts on that victory and how they got it done?
I just thought they were unbelievably impressive. I suppose the words that come to mind very much are energetic. They're so, like, they're just moving with such fluidity around the middle of the field, half-back area, working the ball out. They're just, look, it's very flamboyant type of hurling that I suppose really resonates with the Waterford people, and they've connected with this team because Liam has built a serious outfit, and 3 years in, the graph is still going up for Waterford, in my opinion, and after Saturday night, they're official contenders to Limerick's throne.
Yeah, you were a selector with Waterford in one particular year, obviously a Tipperary man, so I suppose to some degree you can understand what Liam Cahill is juggling in the last little while. What's been really impressive, first off, what are the Waterford public like to deal with? And then also, how well has Liam Cahill dealt with the whole situation of what happened with the Tipperary job and the conversations he'd had and the fact that he stuck with his team?
Yeah, look, that was, I suppose, the fact that he stuck with Waterford kind of said straight away that he saw something in the Waterford group. Whatever happened with the Tip County board, I don't know, but I think it's very, it's very telling that gave him a bit of a momentum as well. Like, players, I suppose, looked at him and went, they thought they were going to go, he was going to go home, and he didn't. And like what they've achieved, and look, they're just, the Waterford people. I suppose the question being, they're great hurling people, and crying for success. Like 1958 is a long time ago since from the last time they won an All-Ireland. So I think they've embraced this team as well, which is, I think, a really, really big thing, that they like what they see on the field. I suppose they were kind of very defensive going back a couple of years ago, and the crowd were howling for more offensive type hurling, and they're getting that now, and they're winning. So yeah, they're in a great place. But look, Liam is doing a brilliant job.
Phil, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, look, I think we're sitting beside each other down at the match, and we were trying to see who'd win, and we were looking at the starting team. And again, even when I was doing previews early in the week, like Stephen Bennett wasn't sure whether he was going to play, or Conor Prunty, and we both kind of agreed if the two lads are fit and line out, Waterford could win it. But like the options they have to, the fact that Austin Gleeson wasn't even there after an exhibition the previous week, Jamie Barron, all-star midfielder, not even in the team. Conor Prunty was coming back and was so good. Like Bennett, just his scoring stats are phenomenal now. But the options they have, like Cormac Daly, I think like Darragh Fitzgibbon came in as the midfielder of the league and all that, but Daly was just the energy, like as we said, just sums up the team. the kind of confidence, the energy, the ability to keep going, start to finish. But the moment that kind of summed up Waterford to me was, for all the scoring, like Robbie O'Flynn, he's just electric. I don't know, is he the fastest on that team of sprinters the Cork had, but they chased him down. He set off in a solo run second half, and they chased him down, hooked him before, just as he was shooting, I think, and then turned him over with about 4 bodies around him, and he was done for steps. Was it changed that moment? It was just like that energy, the pace in the team, which I think you have to have if you want to be an All-Ireland contender. So they were hugely impressive, and we all were. There was a lot of talk about the league structure, and the group stages were a bit, they didn't really capture the imagination overly. But the semi-final and final really showed a level of intensity and quality that I think the scenes on the pitch afterwards, sure, it really meant a lot to Waterford fans to lift silverware.
Well, Will, you were also in college in won a Fitzgibbon Cup with Mikey Beavens, if I remember correctly. What do you think that, like, this is 2 forwards, obviously, himself and Liam Cahill. They've Tony Brown now involved as well, who obviously played in several different positions. What do you see? I'll just give you what I see and then tell me what you see as well. I'm looking at this Waterford team. Obviously, the hard running straight up the middle, that's something that everyone can see. And obviously, they've got scorers everywhere. But it's the fact that he's taken lads who... Is Patrick Kern going to fulfill his talent? And a couple of years there, he wasn't really... we weren't seeing that much of him. Stephen Bennett, unused sub, I think, in the 2017 All-Ireland. Conor Gleeson had a couple of up and down seasons, good in 2017. But all these lads are starting to fulfill their promise now. And then lads like Neil Montgomery, Darragh Lyons, Shane McNulty, unheralded sort of players, they're becoming really good kind of cogs in here. So to me, it's like these players are being upskilled, upcoached, whatever way you want to look at it. And he's getting the most out of them, whereas you couldn't say that about every county.
No, but I think you hit the nail on the head there. The talent was there as regards. You go back to 13 and you had Patrick Kern and Stephen Bennett, probably the top 2 minors in the country playing the game at the time. And you're wondering why they weren't fulfilling that. But like, I think they're like, go back to, I suppose, what you were saying there about Mikey and Liam. Like, Liam is, they're very clever men. Like, they really kind of go after, I suppose, yes, that passion, yes, all the things that you associate with, I suppose, with their playing career. But Mikey was a very kind of technically good hurler. He cut probably his 10 county medals with Tumivara. Really good stick man, won Fitzgibbons, top quality player, but very strategic, I'd say, in his approach to training. Like the way they're working the ball out, and I just looking at it from the league final in the last couple of games, I think that they're short puckouts to go to Gleeson, to go to Burka, to go to Fagan, and they're able to work the ball. They're scoring, I don't know, I think it was 210 over the last 2 games, just on that ability to work the ball out really, really quickly before a defence can get set up under the ball. And like Cork were, obviously with Mark Coleman dropping, they were waiting for the ball to go back to that area. But Waterford just simply too much power, too much pace, but huge amount of strategy. And that comes from the coaching, I think, of Mikey. Their stick passing, their athleticism, they're like that. Liam was a very kind of intense player, very committed, very really kind of on the edge all the time. And like he's bringing all that to bear now in a management capacity. But like it's a really exciting time for Waterford hurling at the moment. And Ginny Mac, they blew Cork out of the water without Gleeson, without Jamie Barron. I think just they look really good at the moment. But I think Liam kind of after the match, his words were telling. Like, this is again the league. This gives us momentum, yes, but it's all about what happens in 2 weeks' time, and that's the really exciting bit for everybody.
Yeah, Phil, what really stood out to you from the game, both from a Cork side or a Waterford side?
Well, just as Willie said, the way Waterford are playing, you could see it in the warm-ups, the drills they were doing in front of us. They play. You'd be tired watching their warm-up. Like they do that drill where you short stick pass, lad running 2 men in the middle, so you get the return, give it to the next guy, take it off the shoulder and give it to the next guy, and like it's about a 70-yard dash. They're doing this relentlessly. So and again, the very same moves translate to the game. So like from the short puckouts, you can see exactly all the things that they've practiced relentlessly in training. They're playing like that, full of energy, kind of attacking in waves, men off the shoulder all the time. It's often very close to what you've seen a load of times with football teams where they literally run in that weave, a 3-man weave. And at times we saw when they get turned, like for the goal, you'll have often 2 men running on either shoulder. So just hugely impressive, very well structured. And I think, as Shane, as you alluded to, it's a great test of a management and coach's ability to improve players. Like, because you can have, you won't have the best team in the country, or you mightn't have, but you'll always know whether managers or coaches, players are improving is the real test of management and coaching. And like, you look at, say, across the water, say you take Manchester United, and you take, you've seen how many 100 million players go in there and end up worse players, form-wise, everything. Whereas like Waterford and Cal's ability, certainly even with the 20s and under 21s, that ability, like Waterford are improving their players all the time, which is all you can really ask for. And like we've seen the likes of Cork Daly, the options that are there. Now look, Cork, there's so much talent, but there's a very interesting debate. I don't know whether you want to get to it, Shane, but like defensively, just at some stage, and we've seen it previously, but you need a defense where defenders want to defend. That's their primary objective. And unfortunately, like with Cork, they've so many ball players, and like they've set the team up around Mark Coleman, who's just wonderfully talented player. But like defensively, they're open through the middle. They have been open through the middle. If you get turned and run at them, the gaps that were there, the wrong decisions that were made in terms of, players going the wrong way and leaving others free. Like it was quite worrying. And Owen Cadigan, a very interesting column about, is it time to move Mark Coleman centre forward or push into the wing and go with a new centre back. But again, I don't know, Cork have spent the whole spring trying to formulate their own version of Limerick's setup, where Declan Hannon he's the chess piece that makes it all happen with a level of protection. And Mark Coleman was doing that brilliantly, but Waterford, again, were so tactical. They went at source, stopped him playing, played around him and about him, and then put the squeeze on him short. And they were overrun down the middle. So that's hugely worrying from a Cork defensive point of view.
I just want to bring up a couple of images here. But first off, Waterford finished all their goal chances to the bottom of the net, giving the goalkeeper no chance. Shane Barrett got in. And look, I think Shane Barrett was one of the few Cork players who actually ran directly down the guts of the Waterford defence rather than going laterally and trying to pop over a point, which is something that when I watched back the first half earlier, it was like time and time again, Cork lads aren't going up the guts. But then again, maybe this is part of the reason why. So if you look at this instance in the first half, it's 7 points to 5 to Waterford at this stage. Shane Barrett has the ball and he's soloing straight up the guts. Now, this is what you want to do. Obviously, you want to draw a man. And look, you can see Cardiff Daly is tracking Dara Fitzgibbon just underneath where Barrett is. To the left, that's probably Conor Lahan and Shane McNulty. Now, I think Waterford is set up brilliantly here. And ultimately, Barrett gets caught and ends up getting dispossessed by Ty Burka, who's just at the tip of the D there. Now, if you compare this, that's really disciplined defending from Waterford, and they just kind of narrow his options. He probably should have taken the point, but the goal was never on, and Cork were obviously looking for a goal here. Now, if you look, I think I'll bring up the first one here. This is Bennett's goal. So Neil Montgomery, and the two goals came in the space of 50 seconds, 25 minutes and 3 seconds, 25 minutes and 53. So it's that rat-a-tat goal like we used to see with Kilkenny back in the day. But anyway, Neil Montgomery was involved in both goals. He got the ball here, and you'd seriously think from this position here, there is no chance that Cork are going to concede a goal here. But obviously, he turns his man, who I think is Rob Downey there, and you can see Bennett, who's 50 yards out from the goal. And you think there's no real issue at this stage. But Mark Coleman, he's standing there on the far left of the screen, kind of in no man's land. Because, number one, if the ball is ran out shortly, he's too far away to really do a whole pile. He's back there marking space where nobody really is. And you can see Mikey Kiley's gone out all the way to the far flank. And Hutchinson has gone out to the wing as well. So they're opening up space, which makes it quite difficult for Coleman. This isn't, I'm just not just blaming him. But he kind of is caught between two stools. And you see as the move, that's the other goal. You see as the move develop. Sorry, I'm mixing up the two of them here. But you see as Montgomery keeps going, he solos on and he does the switch hand pass in for Bennett, who solos on and finishes it. But Coleman is kind of caught between two stools, which makes it very, very difficult for him to actually make a tackle because he can't get into the ruck. And at this stage, he's just going to be bypassed. Then with the other goal, this was a goal that Waterford should have scored just before half-time. It was a ruck ball. I've circled in yellow there in the middle, Mark Coleman. He got sucked towards the ruck, but he never actually got in a tackle or anything like that, which left the back door open, a hand pass out, and Prendergast should have scored. So the point that I'm getting to, and it's obviously a little bit more difficult, Willie, when you've got images rather than the video there, is just that when you're playing as a sweeper, you kind of have to know when to go and when to stay. And it just a couple of times it just did not work out there for Mark Coleman, which is very different, I suppose, at the other end for Tadhg de Búrca, who's number one, doing it for longer, but maybe also the pressure out the field makes it much easier for him, because a lot of the time, ball that was just hit under pressure is just landing in front of him.
And I think that's the key as regards. You look at the last 20 minutes of the semi-final with Kilkenny, where Kilkenny went back to route one, lamping the ball down the field. Mark Coleman looked very, very good because he was like that. He was getting to the pitch of the ball. With Waterford's athleticism, with their ability to play the stick passes, with their ability to come off the shoulder, it somehow makes Mark Coleman redundant in that. In that, I know. Look, that's a screenshot, but that happened throughout the game, and any other centre back that will sit in that area if the ball is not being lamped down on top of him. So I think, look, that there has to be a learning there for Cork, but I think it comes from a little bit of maybe a passive play in the middle area from Cork, not allowing them to really go at Waterford like that, go down the guts of them, yes, but not get turned over or have runners off the shoulder, have shot options as opposed to being turned over and the ball going back down the field. It's something I suppose the Waterford have worked on with Tadhg de Búrca, probably the best in that role as regards of being that defensive linchpin, yes, but again, attacking with a vibrancy. We missed him in the last couple of years with that cruciate injury. He was a massive loss to Waterford in their All Ireland tilts a couple of years ago. He's back. That's I suppose the most encouraging thing from a Waterford perspective is they've so many options. Like Ira Daly on injured as well, and guys that can, like, he stepped in at 19 years of age to play in an All Ireland final and played well. So again, the pedigree of the players that they have. But I suppose back to your point there, Mark Coleman is redundant in the system where teams are working the ball with that energy to that area because they'll bypass them. And like, it was just so interesting. Like, Waterford have had 15 shots in the last 3 games as regards Tip, Kilkenny and Wexford. They've scored 10 goals. Like, their aggregate score over those 3 games is 1068 to 160. Like, it's phenomenal, the goals they're scoring and the chances they're creating. And that's the I suppose the dilemma for opposition teams and managers to set up against, because if you are passive in that middle area, if you allow them to work the ball, which they're so good at, you're effectively making your own centre back redundant.
Phil, I know you're under a small bit of time pressure, but if you want to just stay on for another minute or two, is there anything more you'd say on that, or are you under pressure now?
No. Look, okay for a bit. Just as Willie was saying, just the protection, the key there, and I think maybe Mark Coleman's getting a bit of the flack unnecessarily because Cork were actually very clever in, and I think I said it to Shane during the match, just the two teams were really clever in taking out the centre back or the extra, like the amount of diagonal ball, or they were either running it through the line. So Cork played a lot of clever ball, either over the top, there was one ball that was inch perfect over de Búrca's upraised hurl. It cleared him by an inch over into Horgan, I think, out in the right wing. So like, they're playing the same style, but it's just the protection from midfield to me is the difference. Like, Limerick are brilliant in terms of Will O'Donoghue, particularly like Darragh O'Donovan last year, but they protect, like you say again, that thing, it's like protection that comes on a chessboard for Declan Hannon, and Cork didn't have that. So like, Ger Millerick was deemed a big loss for the All Ireland final last year and was flying, but he was only come back in and didn't have the same impact, and Cork were just left very exposed to the middle. And even the 2 stills that you showed, Shane, the first one, Cork almost had that double sweeper either side the D with Coleman and whoever was over the far side, and one little jump later and 3 players are on the wrong side of their men, so, and turned running backwards. So it's that cleverness, defensively, to hold the man up and tackle. And Waterford are so physical. I think the next most physical team to Limerick, that I think that's obviously where they have a bit of an advantage. Now look, it's the league, lads. In 2 weeks' time, if Tip come to town, the two of you playing the poor Tip mouth, Tip will come along, win the first round, and it'll be completely changed. So look, the proof of the pudding, as Liam Cowell said himself, is championship. But the signs right now, are obviously very good for Waterford. But like, clearly, I must say, I don't know what you think, lad, but it has to be nice for Tipperary in a way to be going in under cover of darkness almost, like the level of expectation.
Forget about
and pressure.
Tip, Phil.
This isn't about Tip. This
Clearly not. This is
Yeah.
a complete smoke screen from the very.
Yeah, no, sorry, but I think there's one big thing here as well, and I think we're being kind of very critical of Cork, I suppose, in the aftermath of getting a beating like that, which flattered at the end with the goal. But Cork had 43 shots, which is kind of that's a lot of shots. It was 55% efficiency of putting the ball over the bar or scoring, but the goals were ultimately the difference. And Cork, again, if they had their shooting boots on, shooting from better areas, they could have scored more. And maybe we're being a little bit critical on Cork as regards. I think Waterford had 32 shots, so like there's a big difference there. Waterford very clinical what they did, running straight, running the hard lines, being ultra aggressive in that middle area, creating, I suppose, the right ball and the overlaps to go to the finishers in Hutchison, Bennett, and it's just maybe something there that Cork again. They failed the test, I suppose. That's what I'd be most disappointed with them as regards they went to the All-Ireland last year. There was a little bit of hope as regards they could do something. They didn't really do anything. They've had a decent league, got to the final again, and they didn't show up on the real big day again. So look, no doubt with Limerick and Cork in 2 weeks' time, that's the place to be getting ready, and their focus, yes, is on that. But at the same time, they had 43 shots. Maybe it mightn't be as bad as we're potentially making out here.
Yeah, I see Owen Cadogan doing a column and he's talking about the rejigging. You've already mentioned it, maybe moving Mark Coleman to centre forward. But his half back line would be Rob Downey, Kieran Joyce, who's played cornerback, played wing back before that, and even defensive midfield against Limerick at the Gaelic ground. So obviously he's a pretty mobile player. Jerry Millerick then he'd have as the other wing back, Darragh Fitzgibbon and Tim O'Mahony midfield. But I know Tim O'Mahony gets a bit of criticism. He's a pretty flashy player. He'll take risks now and again. But I have to say, I love watching him play. And I saw a bit of criticism about that last goal that Stephen Bennett, he caught the ball over Kieran Joyce, soloed in, and then Tim O'Mahony didn't get in a tackle. But I think Stephen Bennett has this brilliant ability to be solo and throw it up as if he's going to shape to strike, put back on the stick. And I think O'Mahony thought he was striking over the bar, and that kind of done in the defender a little bit there. I don't think I put Kieran Joyce centre back straight away because he is a young player and it's such a crucial position. And he did catch a couple of nice balls in the game, but I think teams will target it and try and put a lot of high ball in him. And I know it's not necessarily Mark Coleman's strength playing up there and catching high ball, but I don't know would you make such a drastic change as that right before the championship? I mean, to be fair to Owen Cadogan, who's been in there just last year, he said this notion that moving Mark Coleman out of 6 at this stage of the year would be a knee-jerk reaction is rubbish. So what would you think, Willie? Would you do that this close to the championship?
Yeah, I think Philip mentioned that, or like they've given the whole of the league with Mark Coleman at 6 and, relatively playing well, but they've, again, ultimately failed the test when the real heat was turned up in a league final. I think, it didn't work out. I personally wouldn't. I think it's just a case of getting more energy into that middle area and not kind of running the balls as we mentioned. I think it was Robbie Flynn going through and being turned over. Like that they're big. They're big, I suppose, not mistakes, but I think it's just to be, again, have more energy in that area. I also thought it was very interesting as regards that Waterford went full press on the Cork puck-out, not allowing them even to build from the cornerback, and that one where they were turned over and fouled for a free was a big moment. You could see what it meant to a lot of the Waterford players that they were being given a target to hit and they hit it, and they stopped Cork coming and allowed them to play out, which was what Cork are doing for the entire league. So I think Cork probably have a lot of they're probably delighted being in the long grass now, yes, but at the same time they need to change things a little bit for the Limerick game. And in fairness, bar the All-Ireland last year, they've given Limerick a good go in the last couple of years. So look, you never know.
Yeah, Phil?
Yeah, just without focusing too much on the negatives, like say Sean O'Donoghue was brilliant at the weekend, wasn't he? Like he picked up Desi Hutchinson and did the best man marking job we've seen on the Forum Player, the club championship. Again, I think Tim O'Mahony, like you said, Shane, brings so much to it. He's so dynamic. He's got the presence, the stride, even going forward. So it is just it's the thing about the protection. If they can kind of just give. They were filleted for goals in the All-Ireland final. They were filleted at the weekend. So if they can just set up, which they've been trying to do, to clog the central channels better, which, shouldn't be beyond their reach at all. They are so dynamic with the ball in hand.
Yeah.
And they're so comfortable moving it. They've such pace, so many scoring options. Right from Patrick Collins, he can capable of putting the ball anywhere sideways around to build. So and Shane Kingston to me has to start. So they've great options. We haven't seen Jack O'Connor. That they certainly have the potential to get it right.
I was looking at. Remember, we were looking at this, Phil, during the match, and at times Rob Downey, who was playing wing back, he was standing up at the far 65 where you'd expect a wing forward to be for the puck outs. Now, I don't know, looking back on it now, do you think that was an idea so that it would leave space for midfielders, the centre back, maybe the full back line, that if they were given a short puck out, that they had space to go in, or was he just going for a wander? Because it happened time after time.
Look, it's so well choreographed now. And to be honest, I noticed that with Waterford previously, like Jack Fagan, he was slotting seamlessly from wing back to wing forward, and he had a covering man. I think it was Darragh Lyons previously would just slot in. And at one stage, trying to think of the round match, I saw that I think it was Austin Gleeson cut a ball. Fagan had just drifted like Robert Downey was kind of doing. He just wandered up into the half forward spot for a sideline. They cut it across the field and he had a shot. So all this thing, it's not coincidental at all. Downey's obviously trying to push up and leave space for the runner or Fitzgibbon or somebody to drop, and then they can run at them again. So look, there's a lot of clever stuff going on all the time. It kind of sets things up for the first round of the championship brilliantly, particularly when we were all wondering about the league, the value and all that. But I think we've long moved on from that, because we're gone from the days of knockout in one championship match. The players they know now to get up and down constantly. Because if you think about it, that the idea that losing the league final would set you back. Well, if that's the case, what happens when you lose the first round of a round robin? The players know now we've moved to a match day mentality, where you have to be able to cope week on week with a week turnaround, never mind two. So I think those days are gone when it was pure knockout and there was one chance really, and all the eggs were in one basket. We've moved on from that. So Cork will move quickly on.
They certainly will. Do you know, I was looking at their use of the ball early on, and they did some nice crossfield balls into their full forward line, which worked really well against Limerick the day when they roasted the Treaty in that game. That probably won't really matter too much as the championship goes on. But there was one ball that went in for Lehane, and he popped out a little pass for Horgan. A few minutes later, Horgan collected the ball, popped it out for Lehane. So they were actually working really well in tandem, but the ball just wasn't going over the bar. And after getting their first score on the board after 2 or 3 minutes through Horgan, they missed 7 of their next 8 chances. So they kind of put themselves under pressure. And really, like you pointed out, that they created something it was 47 scoring chances I have down here. Everyone kind of rates it a little bit differently. A shot dropped short, I'd count that a short, others wouldn't, I don't know, compared to 33 for Waterford. But yeah, there are things that they can adjust and get themselves right for the championship. Because I did see there was a run at one stage. They had a shot dropped short from Harnedy. Then Rob Downey delivered the ball directly wide. Then Shane Barrett had a shot blocked. And they were just killing their own momentum. I do think, and this is, again, players have to run straight up the guts and obviously beat a man to draw a man to create a goal chance. Get Jack O'Connor in there. Get, Shane Kingston back in there, and hopefully, he starts a game well rather than having to be dropped or rather having to be brought on to play well. I could still see Cork taking a massive scalp in the summer, and God knows what happens after that.
Oh yeah, no. Look, offensively, they're so good as regards. They score enough, although they didn't score enough the weekend, obviously. But they were, like Philip said, they were filleted again for 4 goals, and Waterford missed a couple of more chances in the All Ireland last year. The very, very same thing. So look, it's just, can they sort out their, I suppose, the defensive or perceived defensive frailties that teams are going for the juggler when they have the opportunity. Waterford, with their direct style of running and runners off the shoulder, which was, I suppose, 3 of the 4 goals of the weekend. Like Philip or Stephen Bennett's goal, like the one he caught, and yes, he could have been closed quicker, but it was an absolutely brilliant goal. You know what I mean? To take on a run from that position, and then with the shot that he has off the left, it's just it was a brilliant goal. So I think that's just a piece of individual brilliance. But I think, look, Cork, as I said, they're sharpen up their shooting. Get, I suppose, like driving 7 wides in a row like that at the start of the second or the first half is it's a killer. It's just deflating. It's like conceding 2 goals because it takes the wind out of your sails. And then for Waterford to score 2 quick-fire goals and kind of really rub it in that they've missed 7, Waterford have scored 2 goals. Like that's a 13-point swing. Like that's massive stuff. Like, and look, I think just to sharpen up on their shooting, to be, as I said, a little bit more selfless with the running around that area. Get Jack O'Connor, Shane Kingston, get these runners back into the team. And yeah, I'm certainly not ruling out Cork, but albeit a little bit disappointed from the weekend. But look, that could serve as fuel to really go at Limerick, which they've done before in the last couple of years, as we said.
Phil, I know you have to go there, but just a final point. I'm going to bring up this poll that I put up after the game there the other night. Who are your favourites for the 2022 Senior Hurling Championship? There was almost 1,100 votes here. Limerick 44.4%, Waterford 44%, another 6.7%, and just 4.9% for Cork. What do you make of that?
Geez, and others come in quite well. Yeah. Look, Limerick, to me, Limerick still have to be number 1 by virtue of what they've achieved in recent years. Waterford, again, look, second best team in the country potentially. And arguably, again, I did a piece 2 Sundays ago, they look like the team with the strongest squad in the country. And if it boils down to that, which round robin championships can do, I think, was it 8 games Limerick needed in 2018. So if it boils down to squad depth, and you don't know how injuries are going to go for any team or run and whatever else, that they could very well be best placed. So I think it's themselves, and I would have had Cork third. I think that the 3 Munster teams look the 3 best teams right now.
Brilliant to have you on the show, Phil, and we'll be chatting again soon.
Cheers, lads.
See you later.
So, do you know what? I'm wondering, how does Ozzie Gleeson fit back into this team the next day? Neil Montgomery's been playing brilliant stuff. He's been involved in their goal scoring chances. The way Patrick Hearn is playing, you can't drop him. Even Pádraig Mahoney only came in for a while in this last game. We haven't seen Peter Hogan yet. They have serious options. I'm thinking the most likely is he might come in for Michael Kiley in the full forward line. Now, he set up a goal, but maybe it didn't quite happen for him against Cork. But, I mean, for Tipperary, imagine Austin Gleeson, Desi Hutchinson and Stephen Bennett trotting in as the full forward line.
Yeah, with precision ball coming into you, with more than 50-50 types of ball coming in a good field in Waterford now after they fixed it. Like it's a scary ask, but I suppose that's the high performance team that Liam has built there now. They literally have 21 guys to fill slots, and that's the scary thing with Waterford at the moment. Like Mikey Kiley, albeit was sluggish enough the weekend, but was absolutely brilliant in the Fitzgibbon going back the last couple of weeks. Like really top class, elusive type player, really aggressive. Like the pass for Patrick Curran's goal was selfless. It was just top class. So how do you fit 21 into 15? But I genuinely think that foreign players, and that's what Liam does and has over the last couple of years, be with the Tip under 20s and now Waterford for 3 years. The best players get the jersey, and players know that there's a really competitive environment of, it's not if you're not playing today that he doesn't trust you. He just said, look, someone is going a little bit better than you, and I think it's testament to the high performance team that Liam has built, and it's credit to him.
Yeah, I'm back in Ballingarry. Did you play in the same? Did you play in the same age grades as Liam all the way up, or was there a year or two difference?
There was 2 or 3 years. Liam was, we won a county minor final in 94, 95, and Liam was our main man. But like Liam was an absolute prodigious player growing up. I think one of the youngest players ever to win an All-Star at 96 at 18. So like he's just an unbelievable player to be around. But the competitiveness that I suppose he showed as that young player is manifesting now in him building a new team. And yeah, look, great fella. Couldn't say enough about him.
Yeah, and it is impressive how he's dealt with the whole situation where the Tipperary job was there, and then obviously he opted to stay with Waterford because, and maybe it's just the fact that his team continues to win. It means, if you're a manager and your team is losing, you have to come out and you have to talk and defend or whatever. But instead, his team is playing so well that he's able to come out and just play everything down, and it's working like a charm for him.
Yeah, like it's the ultimate in like the team is very much a manifestation of Liam's personality and like all the things we see from Saturday night in the last 2 or 3 years with them in the building process is down to him, Mikey, Stephen Frampton, Tony Brown now this year. Like they have a nice blend of everything, but that comes from hard work. And I think Liam's overall vision of what he wanted. There's a few players that are not in the Waterford squad that he just didn't fancy, and it's they're big calls as well to make when you go into a new job. And when I suppose from where they were in year after or before his year one, like he was like the Watford thing was really really going poorly, and he's after picking it from the ground. As I said, they're contenders. There's a lot in it, kind of like I just thought thinking about this last night, like Limerick being the number one team, similar to Kilkenny 10 or 12 years ago. Very same thing. Tipperary building 9, 10. In my mind, there's that kind of feel about Waterford at the moment. They're building, and until they actually get over and look, we look forward to that in the Munster and All Ireland Championship. We won't know if they are if they are good enough or not, and they won't know. So I think there's a really good feel about them. They've built really well, and it's just a fascinating Munster Championship to look forward to. Albeit I'd be a little bit nervous as we were discussing there as a tip man going to Waterford on day one, because they're playing so well. But I suppose look, that's we're coming in the long grass, so that mightn't be a bad thing either.
Yeah, obviously there was a few names in the mix coming up to when Colin Bonner was appointed. Your name was certainly mentioned. But do you think the situation with Liam Cahill, who was, the first name that was being bandied about straight away as soon as Liam Sheedy stepped down, I suppose, was the ball dropped a little bit, do you think, in that sense, the initial ball of Liam Cahill?
Yeah, I look. Liam was the I suppose the man on everyone's lips as regards after what he did with the Tip 20s, after what he did for Waterford the last 2 years. So, yeah, it was a massive disappointment as a Tipperary fan that it didn't happen. But at the same time, yeah, no, just very very disappointed. Like I suppose with the conveyor belt of talent that was coming from that 16 minor team and the two under 21 winning teams, like we had a lot more talent than we seem to have today. And Liam is an advocate, knew all those players well, but an advocate of playing giving youth its chance and throwing them in, which ultimately probably didn't happen in Tips. So I think, yeah, very very disappointing. And I think like he's a top class manager, and as I said, Mikey's a top class coach, and they're massive losses to Tipperary.
And do you see what are you seeing when you look at this Tipperary team at the moment? Obviously, there was the 5 league games. I don't think anyone's going to worry too much about the Munster Hurling League loss to Kerry before that. Obviously, it's not great. But what have you seen Tip do during the league? Are you encouraged by any aspects, or are you a little bit concerned heading into championship?
I think it's just concerned would be very much the word. I suppose take it back to pre-Christmas there, and they reignited the Miller Shield to try and find players. That was a big, I suppose, a red flag for me as regards that. Those players, you should know who your top 30 players are in the county, as opposed to opening it up to a trial basis, which was a noble, I suppose, endeavour. But at the same time, we nearly know what we have from club championship and what's gone before. So I suppose the probably don't have that settled a look, or don't have that kind of, we've no momentum at all, because we didn't, the league match against Waterford was a disaster. And then getting bet by Kerry before all that was that was the first time in history a Kerry senior team had beaten us. So although not important, but at the same time another small milestone, and another kind of maybe an indication of just trying to not knowing what our best team is. And that's the concern I'd have as regards that we probably don't know the best team. But look, I suppose we've been in this situation before. I hope it works out as regards that way, as we get a performance in Welsh Park. But as I said, it's a really difficult place to go now, and you'd want everything well ironed out before you go down there. But look, it'll be a testing few weeks, but hopefully we will do something.
Yeah, and do you think, to some degree, plenty of people would say that things couldn't have worked out more difficult, in the sense that Paddy Maher had to exit the stage, unfortunately. Brendan Maher's gone, Willie Connors is injured, Seamus Callanan is injured. There's a couple of more names that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, but he's been shorn of some experience. And then obviously some of the coming players haven't really had their bow before now. So it's all happening at once. It's very hard to get that flowing game plan, to sort of working it through the lines before delivering it inside.
It's very difficult, and coming off the back of 2 years of COVID, which didn't help either. I know it's not an excuse, but it certainly creates that, I suppose, uncertainty around trying to build a team. Like
It didn't stop him leaving Cahill though.
no, and I suppose that is very much that it's a key point. He hit the ground running from a very very poor year the year before he took over. So, yeah, I think the Paddy Maher, is a really big loss for us. I think he's, he was our defensive leader for the last 10 years, and was there every day. Like that stat of he never missed a championship in that period was absolutely phenomenal. So I think you need experience, but at the same time, we probably didn't blood enough young players in the last 2 or 3 years, and like you look at Conor Bowe coming off an under-21 campaign 3 years ago. Brian McGrath was very good in an All-Ireland under-20 final 3 years ago. Like they're only starting to, I suppose, come into the team now, and that'd be the worry I'd have. That the transition, yes, it's a very very difficult thing to do, but at the same time, it's more difficult when you're bringing in guys that are 23, 24 that haven't got that development opportunity from 20 to 24, and certainly. But look, hey, this could all work out in a couple of weeks' time, and hopefully we'll be talking about the success of what we've done. But it is a concern, and I think it's very it'll be very interesting in the next couple of weeks in the ultra competitive shark pool of Munster hurling at the moment. Like, you know what I mean? You're going in against like Waterford from the weekend, a very battered Cork after the weekend, Limerick waiting in the long grass 3-0-4 the last All Irelands, and a team in the prime of their lives. So this is really competitive, and Clare coming as well. So it's very very fascinating for the neutral, but very very interesting.
Yeah, the Leinster waters are considered far more forgiving than the Munster shark pool. But you're managing Bennett's Bridge there in Kilkenny, so you've had a real close-up view of what's going on in Kilkenny hurling the past couple of years. A player I want to ask you about first of all is Bennett's Bridge star David Blanchfield, because to a lot of people, and I saw Eddie Brennan tweeting it, he's been the find of the league. So can I first ask you about him and then ask you your thoughts on Kilkenny?
Yeah, no, look, David Blanchfield is he's a really tall, I suppose, a modern style wing back as regards. He's so comfortable on the ball, like he's 6'5", he's able to move, he's a good striker of the ball, he's very very clever, but like he's hungry, like he's 20 years of age, and he wants to, I suppose, he wants to play inter-county senior hurling, and he's shown that over the last couple of weeks. But I think he's certainly someone for the future, yes, but at the same time, I think probably Kilkenny need a few guys like him to step up, and they have, in fairness. Bar that 20 minutes against Cork at the end, they were very competitive in that semi-final, so I think they'll be going into the Leinster Championship first match against Westmeath, which might be forgiving for them, but I think they're probably in a better place than they were a couple of months ago.
Yeah, what's the mood like in Kilkenny at the moment? Is there much expectation? Like, people forget they've won their last two Leinster titles, and they shared the league title last year.
Yeah, they don't tell me a whole lot being an outsider, so they're very conservative as regards in their views, and they never speak ill of anybody as regards their team is their team, like us all, and they're fully behind it. But I think they probably struggled a good bit as regards moving from the traditional way they have won All Irelands, probably no more than Tip in that transition as well. That it's the importance of, I suppose, going long and short, being fluid as regards being able to do it, being able to change at a split second as regards to see what's on the field. They were traditionally win your own ball type players, and and that's the way the Kilkenny people want their team to play. So I'd say struggle, and I think when the pressure did come on against Cork, they did revert back to lamping the ball down the field. So it's I'm sure they've learned a lot from that, but like again, the Leinster Championship, they've won the last two championships, so they're not, and they're a puck of a ball away from getting to the All Ireland again. So it'll be interesting to see what happens during the Leinster Championship.
Another one of your old Fitzgibbon Cup teammates and a Kilkenny man, Henry Shefflin, is over Galway this year. What was he like when you had him as a teammate? Possibly even a housemate back in college, or have I that part wrong?
Yeah, that part wrong. We were in Kieran's together, all right, and we went down to WIT as freshers. So it was a phenomenal player. Like, he's probably the most storied hurler in the game at the moment with 10 All Irelands. So really really good player, really really good fella, and yeah, it's been a tough few weeks for him and on all the Shefflin family, and they've gone through an awful lot in the last while, and just pass on my condolences again.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see them having, what sort of a season do you see Galway having? They're certainly in a bit of transition too.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big season because they from where they were and winning the All Ireland in 17, they have seemed to drift a little bit with a huge conveyor belt of talent, or what seems to be a talent with not really coming through to win championships. So it's a really big year for them. They're with Richie O'Neill and Damien Joyce, and they look again a really good backroom team there to get the most out of them. And it will be interesting to see as regards if Henry's playing credentials of those 10 All Irelands transfer into a management and a style to bring Galway back to the top table.
Yeah, is there any county that you would consider, beyond Limerick, Waterford and Cork, that you would see as a real contender this year?
I don't think so. I was kind of trying to when that another stat came up, I was kind of going who are the other contenders there. I think Waterford Limerick are, yes, and rightly so, favourites. I think Waterford, obviously up from the weekend. Cork will come back, and we've mentioned as regards with the 43 chances that look they're sharpen up their shooting, and they won't be far away. Tip, look, again, we've discussed it briefly as regards a little bit unknown from the league campaign, and to see if a new style is being developed as regards of playing that short and long game will be very, very interesting. Galway, look, on their day, they have players and they could do something, but I think it's probably a big year for Dublin and Wexford as well as regards. I don't know, have they the artillery to go the full way to an All Ireland final, but both will be targeting a Leinster Championship, and that's something that's very attainable for both camps.
Yeah, I was actually, and I know you didn't see this game, but I was in Thurles for the precursor to the League One final on Saturday to see Down be beaten heavily by Westmeath, 519 to 117. So that's a Joe McDonagh title last year under Shane O'Brien, and this year Joe Fortune has taken over and they've won a Division 2 title. They're going back up to Division 1 for next year. But it was very interesting. It was only on March 6th that they had lost to Down at home in Mullingar in the league, and they needed to win all their games from then on, or they wouldn't have been able to get promoted. And they did just that. They beat Kerry, they beat Kildare, and then they put in this thumping performance where Davy Glennon scored a hat-trick. And I thought it was interesting afterwards, the words of Joe Fortune, when they were in that situation where they had to win from then on. And it was interesting that he was talking about how some people within the county had doubted him. Obviously, he's an outsider coming in, and here's what he had to say.
Hurt, because I think even some of our own doubted us then. What will Westmeath doing, and who is this fella up managing them? And it hurt me personally. I stopped that day in Kinnegad going down the road, I'll be honest with you, and I questioned whether I had the real backing of the county board and the players met together, and that really hurt me that day. But yeah, we needed a kick up the hole maybe. We needed a kick up the arse to kind of really get us back on track again, and it was the players that led it. It wasn't nothing to do with me. They looked for higher standards from themselves that day. They locked the doors in Cusack Park and they addressed themselves as saying we need to push this thing ourselves now. The coaching is fine, the management is fine, the fitness stuff is fine, but we just didn't perform. And look, credit to Ronan Sheehan and that Down team as well. I'm not going to take away from the fact that they've had an amazing league. People underestimated them, and they're a really, really strong team, and the work that he's doing with them is phenomenal. And look, I'm just delighted for our own lads that we got over the line.
Yeah, it's interesting that Joe will go down the route of divulging that information, Willie.
Yeah, but Joe, in fairness to him, was a very, very honest character, and I suppose having managed against him in Dublin and the tip under 21s against Dublin in a couple of years, he is a very, very passionate guy, and everything is left, I suppose, there, and it's probably part of his management style. But it's also interesting that the players took it on themselves to really drive this and really go after, and the standards piece being a really, I suppose, attainable improvement that you can make, and I think that's it was good. I think credit to Down, and again, I've been watching, I suppose, probably from a distance as regards looking at highlight clips and looking at results on Twitter and bits and pieces. They seem to have really kind of upped their game, although a very, very poor defeat on the weekend. But they were, really competitive through the league, and like that, providing, I suppose, a huge honesty in their effort, and it was rewarded throughout the league campaign.
Yeah, Ronan Sheehan, their manager, was saying we've 2 weeks now before we get out to Kerry in the McDonagh Cup. We want to maintain our done a cup status. That won't be easily done. That'll be a battle, but we're up for the fight, and we'll see how it goes. What I did notice about Down is they have a very small pool. I think they picked from just 5 clubs in the game. Just the size-wise, you could see that, you know, Westmeath had monsters, and there was maybe Paul Sheehan was probably the biggest of the Down players, and he wasn't overly massive. He's probably 6'1", but then on the other side, you've the likes of Tommy Doyle, who's a monster. Who, you know, he's a Liam McCarthy level player. Niall Mitchell is another monster. Derek McNicholas made his debut all the way back in 2004. He's still playing there. Joey Boyle was excellent. Killian Doyle, I mean, what a quality player he is. So they're kind of set up well going into the summer. But, I mean, it's very difficult to see Westmeath and Laois being able to do anything more than, you know, battle it out for the bottom spot in Leinster this year, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's a numbers thing. Like you mentioned some, you know, really top level players there, but just probably have 10 or 12 of those, and then there is a fall off in standard, which is ultimately at the highest level. You know, you get the gaps will be there to be seen as well. So I think that they're Joe's doing a good job with Westmeath. I think they are building, but I don't think, you know, it's very difficult to build out of, as you said there, to get away from that match against Laois, which is the biggest game that they'll play, and it's a difficult one, because, like, well, what do you do? I think I'd be a supporter of increasing the standards and letting teams play against better teams, because I think that's the only way to develop. But at the same time, how do you do it in a meaningful way is the $1 million question.
Yeah, and for a lot of the Ulster teams out there, I think they've been kind of buttressed by support from Leinster and entering their competitions. But like Down in the Division 2A final, Antrim, they're obviously staying up in Division 1. Derry won the Division 2A final, beating Sligo at the weekend, so they're up to 2A. They were unbeaten all league. Oran McKeever scored the goal there. Tyrone and Armagh played in the 3A final, Tyrone winning that, and then Fermanagh beat Longford in the 3B final. So actually Ulster hurling is starting to, you know, you just wonder, why isn't there an Ulster Championship? Surely there's room, because it's not like there wouldn't be a few weeks after the end of even the championship when Antrim and the Christy Ring and all those competitions are over, just to stage an Ulster Championship. Is that too much to ask?
I don't think so. I think that's very attainable. I can remember even watching, you know, back in the day, watching the Sunday game and watching the matches in Casement Park, you know, the Ulster finals, and, you know, good quality hurling, good crowds there. I think it's the only thing that they can try and build up there as regards it's and try to have a decent Ulster Championship, because there is decent teams there, and I think, you know, from a lot of the club activity going on in a lot of these counties, be it Knockneal, be it Cushendall, Dunloy, I don't know, some really, really top club teams out there. So I think for a club championship, it has to happen, and I'm sure there's some window somewhere to fit it in, because and again, these guys are playing in, you know, predominantly football counties, which is another really, really difficult thing for them. That, you know, they're the best hurler invariably sometimes is the best footballer, and it's a difficult thing to do, to choose hurling in a football county and vice versa. So it's not an easy thing, and I think, but to answer your question, I think definitely an Ulster Championship would make a massive difference to even the profile of the game within Ulster.
Absolutely. So that's it for the show today. Once again, we're brought to you by ogreretro.com. If you want to get any of those jerseys, maybe even this Waterford one that I'm somehow dragged on myself today, go to ogreretro.com and use the promo code OurGame. Willie, thanks very much for coming on. We had Derek Caneda and Phil Lanigan on before that as well. Thanks very much, Willie, and sure, hopefully we'll be chatting to you again soon.
Thanks.